Well, I think there's like a few lessons that can be learned in terms of, I think because Africa has a really young population, and also in many countries, and also sort of relatively new infrastructure. So I think the main thing Africa, I would think, can learn is that you can sort of like avoid some of the mistakes that like Europe has done in its past. So one is about sort of like the way we've designed our urban drainage systems and how we've dealt with sort of like natural habitats. I think like Europe, as like the first continent to be industrialized, we have like a really long legacy of like old drainage infrastructure, old buildings. There's like a lot of like sealed surfaces. We have like sort of like destroyed a lot of our natural habitats in terms of like forests, like natural forests that can sort of like absorb a lot more water. And so I think in Africa, you still have like a lot of opportunity to don't repeat those mistakes, like still like seeing the value of like natural the natural environment, and also in like protecting human lives by sort of like absorbing more water, like not building in areas that are sort of like that you need basically to hold back water, like mangrove areas or like coastal areas, like mountainous areas where you basically like I know a lot of like logging and so on in Europe has like led to just like higher like runoff rates. And I think we like in Europe, we start like building everything back and sort of like trying to fix those mistakes, but it's a long process. And I think if you don't destroy the things in the first place, I think you're in a much better place. Same as with like certain technologies. I think we have in Europe, we have a long legacy of like old technology. So I mean, especially in Germany, sort of there are like many places in Germany where probably the cell phone infrastructure and cell phone reception is probably worse than in parts of Africa, just because we have sort of like these competing technologies. Sort of like there's like still like old classical phones, then there's sort of like internet over broadband and cable, and sort of, but I think like mobile technology in that sense is very vital, because you reach people everywhere. And sort of in Germany, I think, and in other European countries, that technology is there, but it's still like sort of like developing. While I think in many places in Africa, you could basically you could leapfrog a lot of like technology steps, and you go straight to cell phone broadcasting, and you do that really well. And I think that would definitely help to also sort of like improve your sort of like, yeah, talking about technology, yes. Yeah, no, I think there's an opportunity in many countries in Africa to basically like leapfrog some of the outdated technologies, and like directly invest in like mobile technologies, which are a lot more suitable for like early warning, for example. So I think there's definitely some lessons learned in terms of like creating resilient infrastructures by having sort of rather like a bit like more, for example, cell phone towers than too little. Yeah, I think probably that's like the main learnings I would see is basically protection of like natural habitat and its like capacity to absorb water, sort of still like decisions on where to build, and sort of like where to build infrastructure, how to build infrastructure. And I think sort of like knowing that a lot of infrastructure, I think, will be built on the African continent over the next few decades. And I think if there's like sort of like the right decisions are made on how to build it, and like knowing that it need to be adapted to the impacts from like climate change, like climate risks, like storms, flooding, and so on, heat. I think that basically would create would be a lot easier than sort of like what sort of like most parts of Europe need to do now, sort of like adapting their existing very old infrastructure. And it's a very difficult process. Like for example, in a lot of the urban drainage system is now outdated in Europe. Sort of like most urban drainage systems now in the big cities are over 100 years old. So they now need to be replaced, which means you have to dig open like all the streets and like put new pipes in, and like you always have to operate in the existing infrastructure. While sort of like if you need to create new settlements for people, and in countries like Ghana or Nigeria, or Kenya, where you then sort of like you know that you need to make this like adapt this to sort of like increasing risk from rainfall, heat, drought, and so on. I think that gives you an advantage. And the last thing is technology. You can basically you don't need the legacy of like, you don't have the legacy with all these like old technologies that are now basically still in use. Part of society are using them, part of the society and part of the population in Europe is not using them, and you basically need to now like do it over all channels, because some older people won't have phones or like cell phones. Some younger people won't have sort of like traditional phones. So you basically have to go through all these avenues. While sort of like if you have a population where almost everyone has a cell phone, then you can like focus more on these technologies to like really do them well.